Hi, Delia here. For a quick video, I'm going to talk about a word that comes up actually quite a bit in my soul purpose readings, and it's vulnerability. And horses seem to use it in different ways. And I'm going to do 3 quotes from 3 different horses that talk about vulnerability and how it affects them. And it's all been given with permission. I never do anything from a soul purpose reading without permission. So the first horse is Marley. He's a Hanoverian, and his a little statement he made about vulnerability is mutable, it is malleable, it is where change takes place. Vulnerability is beautiful because it is pure. It invites the healing power of innocence to remember parts of ourselves that were punished and discounted. And I found that a very interesting take on vulnerability, about how that when we're vulnerable, even though when we interpret it, we usually mean it that we're at risk, we're possibly could be in danger, whether it's emotional, mental, physical. But the way he interprets it is that you're malleable. So while in the place of vulnerability, if you look at it consciously and from a more spiritual approach, we can find that we are actually much more malleable. It's also pure. When you're vulnerable, there's not a lot of armor around, there's not a lot of disguise, there's not a lot of things that we can do to hide the truth of where we are in that moment. And another one is by Ruby. She was an Arabian mare, and she is an Arabian mare. She says, I was strong and confident, but now because of my injuries, I am vulnerable. I fear that I may be forced into a life that I don't want. I can recover if I'm given time, but perhaps I will be passed over for a horse without compromise. It is disheartening that my worth may be decided by my usability. Humans see me as who I was and what I could do, not for who I am. I fear that now I will be tolerated before I was celebrated. And that was a really heartbreaking thing to hear a horse say and have her talk about. But it was true. She had had an injury and there just wasn't enough time allowed for healing. And so she kept getting re-injured. And she always was spunky and full of fire and knew who she was because of what she could do. But it actually, this whole reading was almost like there was a midlife crisis for her. She was literally changing what she could do, who she was, and her identity as a horse in the eyes of human, as well as in the eyes of herself. And one more quote on vulnerability. This is from a mare, Dido. She said, for horses, vulnerability tells you that you must adapt to what is. The best and safest way for a horse to use the power of vulnerability is to look for a place to trust. Where or in whom in this space of what is can you allow yourself to trust? In this situation, the horse must override its senses and use its mind. And I found that a really interesting and brilliant take on vulnerability coming from a horse, a whole different way that they're vulnerable. It always amazes me and most horse people that we know that horses are indeed so strong and so powerful, and yet they tolerate so much and they're at risk, even though they could use their force to save themselves or change a situation. In the end, they're vulnerable because their actions will come back to haunt them if they stand up for themselves, if they speak too loudly with their body language. And so for her take to say you look for a place where you can find trust was really a unique perspective on vulnerability. So I just wanted to cover that today. A brief video on vulnerability from excerpts from the Soul Purpose readings. If you'd like more information on that, go to my website, truenorthequestrians.com. That's equestrians with an S, and you can look at Soul Purpose readings. Scattered throughout my website, I have various quotes from the readings. So thanks for joining me. And just a thought for today, vulnerability, many aspects, and the way it can affect us and how we can manipulate it or become part of the process of vulnerability itself.